Hello.
Hi. We're back.
We're back of the Friday Footnote podcast. This is actually being recorded on September 17th, 2022, and it will air on September 23rd, 2022. So I wanted to make that announcement first. And I also want to thank Rockfin for the support and the follows.
Thank you, Rockfin followers.
And also our patrons for continuing to support the work. And for those of you who have made donations, whether it's through PayPal or even the mail, thank you for that as well. We are going to be releasing this particular audio podcast, this edition of Friday Footnote. We're going to be releasing it to the public today because the sense of urgency around it. It's 2 weeks until the final quarter of 2022 takes place. So we want to make sure that we help to illustrate what that means in the professional sector and what it means for the latest executive order that was signed on September 12th, 2022.
Okay. I'm still setting levels, so sorry about that. Okay, that looks pretty well. Okay, it's still a little high, so sorry if there's any distortion going on. What we're going to talk about today is something that came out earlier this week, earlier in the week of.
As I just said, the executive order was signed on September 12th. 2022.
My bad. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was paying attention to levels.
That's okay.
So the executive order on advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation for sustainable, safe, and secure American bioeconomy. Now that's a lot of buzzwords packed into one title of an executive order. Right? So let's look at those buzzwords. One is biotechnology, biomanufacturing, and that may be a term that a lot of you have not ever heard of before. Innovation, this word comes up a lot in both the document and the video that we'll be discussing. Sustainable, that's a word that you've been hearing a lot lately. Safe, that's another word you've been hearing a lot lately. Secure, that's something we've all been hearing for at least the last 20 years. And bioeconomy, which is something new. I kind of guessed what it was, but they say it in this document, and it's basically the economy that is formed around biotechnology and biomanufacturing.
Right.
Now, biomanufacturing is something like, it could be anything from using natural organisms to make plastics, to creating something a little more sophisticated than that, to like what one person said was a shot in the arm. And so it's a wide field, and it kind of piggybacks on to what we know of as biotechnology. And what a lot of the people in the video that we'll be discussing, it was a panel discussion that was 4 hours long?
Originally, something like that.
One of the things that they were saying is that biotechnology and especially biomanufacturing is no longer centered around the life sciences.
Right.
Okay, but it does have a lot to do. It has a lot of impact on other areas, and this. This executive order covers a lot of that, and some of it's kind of fucking scary.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that I brought up in the hour-long discussion that I had, by myself when I did an hour-long audio on this, because there was so much interest in this executive order, and a couple of people had actually asked me personally to make a commentary about it. So I did an hour discussion on September 16th, which I made public.
And you can find that on our blog.
You can find it on the blog. But one thing I wanted to do was just kind of, piggyback on everything that you had just said about bioeconomy. So, just to recap, what I had said yesterday, which was September 16th, the economy a long time ago was based on gold, and then it was based on oil, and then it moved into data, and it was based on data. So our currency, our dollars, which is fiat currency, was based on, all of these, something. It could stand on something. At first it could stand on gold, and so it was gold backed currency, and then it was oil backed currency, and you needed war in order to make it an oil backed currency, right? So they were wars for oil, and then became the sort of the .com boom, and it became a tech backed currency or data backed currency, and now it's a bio backed currency.
Right.
And that is where all of this kind of comes into play, and it's the extraction of humans. It's the extraction of their time. It's the extraction of their energy. It's the extraction of their behavior, which will back now the fiat currency, back the U.S. dollar, and they're hoping to, sort of bring it back, if you will, because it's lost its value in the global market.
I think also it's going to if this was a Venn diagram, it's also going to dip into the idea of debt, and that's through a number of things like education, which they bring up a lot in this audio in this video
summit,
in the summit that took place, and I think it also gets talked about a little bit in the executive order. So debt plays a role. And the weird thing about this, or not the weird thing, but the important thing about this executive order is that this is going to touch every sector of the economy, except for maybe like truly small business, like Main Street small business.
Right. So it's a $30 trillion goal. And that is a number that kept getting repeated in this 4-hour summit over and over again. And just to recap, something again that I had put in the hour-long audio yesterday, you have these summits, these long, boring conference room-like summits where you've got industry representatives who suddenly have a seat at the table. You always have them coming together and appealing to the government for that piece of the pie after an executive order gets signed. So Biden signed this executive order on September 12th, and next thing you know, on September 14th, you have every representative from every biotech and biomanufacturing and bioengineering industry, and you have the national security industry represented, and you have big agriculture, and you have the Department of Education represented. So you had each and every individual sitting at this table appealing for a piece of that $30 trillion pie. So to go with what you just said, that this is going to move out into every industry in our economy is correct, because right now our GDP sits at $21 trillion. So this is going to absorb like the entirety of our American experience. That's the goal. The goal is to absorb the entirety of our American experience. But as we know, sometimes goals don't pan out because of why? Because the little guy, like me and you, we resist. And we've seen that happen in the age of COVID with all this resistance.
Now, it's like I said, it's not going to affect Main Street businesses, right? Like small, like a barbershop or a bar.
Like the bread maker down the street from us is not going to be affected by this.
They may be a little bit, because they're sort of part of that food thing that we'll talk about. But they may or may not be. Maybe in the types of the way that the grain is grown that they receive. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that you mentioned the GDP. These are all the types of businesses and businesses, I guess I should say, and enterprises that don't play a part of the GDP, because the GDP doesn't always represent the entirety of the American economy. It's only certain aspects of the economy.
Sure.
And it's the bigger players and things like that. I don't remember exactly how it's parsed out.
Right.
But that's something important to remember. So this is all about all the big players, all the big sectors, and where money can actually be made. And this is what it all comes down to, money.
Right. It always comes down to money. $30 trillion is no laughing matter. Like, we have to take this executive order and the follow-up summit that came, afterwards. We have to take it seriously. If you want to know who the players are, and if you want to know who these people are, and if you want to kind of estimate or make an educated guess about who is going to get the most money, then you should probably look at the players and see what their backgrounds are and see how long they've been in existence. There's one company, for instance, that has only been around for 2 years, which means that it was established in the age of COVID, which should give everyone pause for thought. That this sort of biotech industry was allowed to slip in under the cracks while we were all distracted and upset about a virus or a threat of a virus, right, JP?
Right, exactly. I'm writing down a couple notes here. So what I would like to piggyback on what you just said, or just to add to this whole thing and help frame this idea, or this audio podcast, is that everything that has been pushed before that hasn't really come to fore yet. For instance, let me just put it this way. What this executive order is doing is it's folding in the green economy, social responsibility, biotech, security, education, manufacturing,
right,
equity, which is a word they use a lot, and everything else that we've been talking about. The green economy has been around for at least 20 years. And and I'm in, and maybe longer, because I'm incorporating. I'm thinking of organics, mm-hmm. and supplements, health supplements, eco this and that. Okay,
right.
And which is basically consumerism wrapped in a green
right, in a
biodegradable
package.
right. And so so there's nothing new there. So this is getting folded in. So the Green New Deal, and this is something I mentioned to you this morning, is like it was just a test balloon. The Green New Deal is folded into this.
Right. So that's why this is probably the most important thing to look at. I mean, a lot of people think that the green movement is the thing to really be concerned about. But like he just said, it's folded into this biotech, biomanufacturing sphere, and this all-encompassing $30 trillion goal that they have. And remember, it's not too far off the mark to think that, pensions, mm-hmm. safe savings accounts, mortgages will be absorbed into that $30 trillion. Right. So you may lose your pensions because of this biotech, biomanufacturing executive order that was just passed.
Right, and the way that would happen is it gets invested by the
right,
the bank or the
right.
Agency or whatever.
Right, the investment house that handles your retirement or your pension.
Right,
they invest it back into product or in economies or in fields that they feel will have a good return. And if those returns don't work out, then you've lost your pension.
Right,
and we saw that in 2008. Right. With the mortgage crisis, right?
And it's been going on. I mean, Cory Morningstar has been talking about mm-hmm. this with carbon sequestration mm-hmm. and the investments around that. So like people like Al Gore, who have this fund out there that invests in this kind of stuff, mm-hmm. he doesn't have to invest in it. The billionaires that are trying to start these companies don't have to invest in it. They take money from the public sector,
right,
or private investments, and invest them into these things. And again, like you just said, if they don't work out, oh well.
Yeah, and also they're going to increase your tax base in order to fund these sort of these ideas, these unicorn ideas, like carbon sequestration,
Right.
which is a unicorn idea.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So before we go any further, I want to just read at least the first paragraph, maybe the first two, because it really spells out, it encompasses basically what this whole thing is about. It's a very long document. I haven't even been able to read the entire thing.
One thing I said yesterday is that for an executive order, it's particularly long.
Yeah.
Usually executive orders are like a page or two. This is quite long with a lot of paragraphs.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to give it, as much attention as we can.
Yeah. So by the authority invested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. Policy. It is the policy of my administration to coordinate a whole of government. Now, this is an important word. It comes up a lot in the summit. A whole of government approach to advance biotechnology, biomanufacturing towards innovative solutions, very corporate there, innovative solutions in health, climate change, energy, food security, agriculture, supply chain resilience, and national and economic security. Central to this policy and its outcomes are principles of equity, ethics, safety, and security that enable access to technologies, processes, and products that in a manner that that benefits all Americans and the global community, and that maintains United States technological leadership and economic competitiveness. And they go on in the second paragraph to talk about how the economic activity derived from biotechnology and biomanufacturing is referred to as the bioeconomy, which I mentioned earlier. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the vital role of biotechnology and biomanufacturing in developing and producing life-saving diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines that protect Americans and the world. So they're piggybacking on the gains that were made through the COVID-19 campaign.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, are you done?
I think that basically sums it up. There's a lot here, but those first two paragraphs
really
do. And then I can come back to this later because there's some parts that are further down that kind of talk about they clarify things. So these are all paragraphs that are further down, and what this executive order is mostly about, and this is something you have to keep in mind. We are not being Chicken Little about this. What this is about is reports. The president is requiring or asking through requirements of the cabinet level agencies in the United States government to bring produce reports within, I think it is 6 months. I think it was. Not 90 days, but whatever, 6 months, 180 days. These reports to produce information about how something could be done, or when it could be done, or what could be done.
Right.
Okay.
And so you have that sense of urgency coming out of the summit itself. And the moderators of the summit, there were a couple of different moderators. One in particular was especially animated and kind of high-strung. And you could tell she was under a lot of pressure to make sure that every sector had an opportunity to be represented and speak their goal. And so these reports that he's talking about are going to be long and involved, and they're going to be hundreds of pages. The representatives of these different sectors and these different fields of industry had to take those reports that they're in the middle of writing and condense it to a 1 to 2 minute to 3 minute speech.
Well, that's what this document here, this executive order, helped them do.
Right.
Because I'm sure they all got copies of it before it was released publicly.
Yeah.
Because they were all speaking to the different aspects of this. So let me just run down some of these departments. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce. And they're usually in consultation with somebody else. So Secretary of Commerce in consultation with the Secretary of Defense. And this has something to do with strengthening the resilience of the United States supply chains. So there's a fascist move right there that we're going to have the military involved with our supply chains. Director of National Science Foundation. Okay, so that's like, I don't know how many that was. But anyway, that's 5.
So when you have these different departments and these different agencies that are out of the government, like Health and Human Services or the Department of Defense and the National Security State, this tells you that there is an aspect to like a race against time. So a lot of the language that was coming out of this 4-hour summit too was that we don't want to share these innovations with China.
Right.
China has actually offered to fund our innovations, but we don't want to leave our soil. We don't want to leave the United States to go to China and work on these innovations. So there's this national security threat, sort of in a business in a business way, that's being communicated to the public through this summit, which is that it's a race to beat China.
Right.
Just like in the Cold War, it was a race to beat Russia to space.
Right.
It is now, this entire executive order and this entire summit is all about a race to beat China in the biotech and biomanufacturing industries.
Yeah,
because they are coming up coming up and meeting us, or if not surpassing us in these industries. And so the United States doesn't want to be left behind, and so they want to move forward in progress.
And I'll come back to that in a second, but I do want to say that the language around this whole thing, especially in the summit, reminded me of the whole period of time in the Cold War. I was born in 1963, so I caught some of it. I mean, I was a kid, but I remember hearing that even into the early 70s, this was still a thing, right? Because there was still the moon program, and so with NASA, doing that, and then subsequently getting into the space shuttle thing, this was all part of the thing. And then you hear like past broadcasts or bits of media that were basically talking about this drive to get education up to speed for the upcoming computer age. They weren't calling it that at the time, but the whole idea of bringing up the level of education to support science and technology was huge. I mean, my dad worked for a short time in the aerospace industry in Southern California. And so, I was surrounded by all that. There was all kinds of, manufacturing and research and development in the Southern California area and in Northern California too, in the Bay Area. Dealing with aerospace and other kinds of technologies that were really, driving the government and the economy, I think, and war was good for that.
Yeah. So it's the same kind of energy and the same kind of language that is being promoted with this executive order that was signed on September 12th, 2022. And so when a lot of people, not to get too off track here, but a lot of people are concerned for some reason about the date September 24th, because somebody in the German parliament said it will be a date to sort of remember in infamy, like you'll remember where you are. And, and then of course what we have is, Q4 coming up with October 1st, right around the corner. So I think a lot of people are feeling nervous about what might be next for us with our economy and with our national security. And this kind of executive order gives you a clue as to, where we're headed. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And, this, let's also remember that this is a very long-term goal They're talking at least 10 years, but I have a feeling that this fits in with ESGs and all that other stuff, that we're looking at 10 to 30 years out,
Right.
because they're basically creating a new economy.
Basically, yeah. And one of the things that I mentioned to a friend of mine was, that if you look at the COVID experience and all the crazy ad campaigns,
Yeah.
and you had Broadway musical stars, creating little, songs about how important it was to get your COVID shot. You had, rock stars introducing their show by talking about the different vaccines. I mean, the money that went into the promotion of the COVID shot was over the top. So the kind of money, the $30 trillion that's going into the biotech and biomanufacturing field, a portion of that will be dedicated to sort of product endorsement.
Yeah.
And it will be, like you said earlier, it will be a really long ad campaign that is focused on changing our behavior around biotech and changing our behavior in general, like our habits. When the space race was first promoted, and it was just this kind of long ad campaign to beat Russia to space, and that it was really important. At the very beginning of it, I'm sure a lot of people were like, why the fuck do we need to go to space? We need jobs here, right here on Earth, especially in the United States. What do we care what Russia's doing? Let's focus on things that we really need here. So it's the same kind of, conversations that are happening in households all across the United States. Why the fuck do we care about building out facilities for biomanufacturing and capturing carbon and doing all these crazy experiments on humans when, humans just need jobs,
right.
Especially this country. We just need opportunity and jobs and to live and pay our mortgages. So it's the same kind of thing. And eventually what happened in the space race in the 1960s is people's behavior started to change. They started saying, no, I think it's important that we go to space.
Right.
I think it's important that we beat Russia. And so this same kind of campaign is going to be rolled out.
Right.
It's going to be kind of like what I like to call kind of like a soft power, sort of game of Go move, where you'll subtly be influenced over time. Because if you're in college, for instance, or going to university, your professors will drop one or two sentences about the importance of biotech, just like they did in the 60s when kids were in university back then, and they would drop the importance of the space race. Whether you were in an English lit class or you were studying, old world Russian languages, suddenly it would be thrown in there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it became this overwhelming idea that it was really important as an American citizen to move forward into the space technology. And so that's the kind of ad campaigning that you'll see with the biotech and biomanufacturing. You're not going to see the over-the-top crazy graphics that you saw with COVID, like with Stephen Colbert dancing with people dressed up like a
syringes.
vaccine or syringes. You're not going to see that with the biotech biomanufacturing goals. It's going to be something much more subtle, but much more long-term, to change your habits and the way you think about the world and reframe your vision about what life is supposed to be like through the lens of biotech and biomanufacturing.
Right. Now, before we get into the recordings or some of the clips we're going to feature from the summit, I want to just clarify or kind of frame this and just say, look, a lot of this will be framed in positive, feel-good language. It will sound, really cool and really great. And some of the ideas actually are in some ways. But the problem with that is that, this is going to be business as usual. It's not changing anything. It's still going to make rich people richer. It's still going to basically
hurt the
poor, even though they say that they're not. It's still going to do things to the environment that may be detrimental, even though they say it's trying to help the environment. They're just doing things in different ways. They're saying that they're going to, get rid of. They're basically decarbonizing industries, okay? But they're not talking about pollution. They're not talking about economic welfare, and they're not talking about really quality of life issues. And if anything, I think that this is going to be detrimental to quality of life. For instance, they're going to, a couple of the things, they're going to talk about agriculture. And, one of the things that is mentioned in the executive order is food safety and food, and agriculture and things like that. But they're talking about alternative food sources. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize, and I don't want to sound reactionary or Luddite about this, because even though I'm feeling like this is forcing people into a new way of living that we've never lived before. It's taking people off the land. It's taking people out of the environment, out of natural environments, and doing it in a way that is subtle and corporate, and it's claiming that this is going to be for health purposes, to help us live healthier lives. But what we really know, especially after the COVID campaign, is that we need to be in natural settings. Mm-hmm. We need to have open spaces and land. We need to have places where we can recharge our bodies, have our feet on the ground or in the ocean or in a lake, or somewhere where there is not commerce and advertising and concrete and Wi-Fi and
you've got to get away from all that in
right.
order to develop ideas for the best way to survive for yourself.
Right.
If you're constantly surrounded by your Wi-Fi connection, if you don't take off your shoes and walk through the sand by an ocean, or walk through, the grass or a riverbank, then you're not quite a human being.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, do you want to get into the some of the clips?
I do. So, there's 4 clips here, and there's a 5th clip that I forgot that I wanted to include. So, we'll figure it out. We will, but yeah. So let's get into the first clip, which is Tia Lyles-Williams.
Okay. All right. Now this woman, I'll just tee this up. This woman is she is the face of equity, but I'll get into that after. So let me bring that up, and let's play her. Correct? Yeah. Yeah. This is the one. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay, Tia.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Got you. Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, founder and CEO of Lucas Pop Bio. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today and share what we're doing at Lucas Pop Bio. I want to thank my supporters that came today: IMSCO Scientific, Berkeley Lights, Heliplex, Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing, University City Science Center, and special guest 54 Gene and Philadelphia OIC. Lucas Pop Bio is a contract development organization, manufacturing organization. So what that means is that we manufacture drugs on contract, particularly biologic drugs. So if you had the opportunity to partake in the COVID-19 vaccine, those are the type of drugs we make: viral vectors, gene vectors, monoclonal antibodies, cell therapies, you name it, anything large molecule or biologics we're able to make. Right now, we're able to service our customer needs for preclinical studies. We work in partnership with Thomas Jefferson University at the Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing, as well as a cell line developer based in San Francisco, Celthion. We're able to produce material and develop manufacturing processes for those biologic drugs. Everything up until the point of sitting with FDA and getting permission to enter human clinical trials. Most recently, we just announced our CGMP facility that we're building out, 80,000 square foot bioprocessing facility in Southwest Philadelphia, PA. So this is an urban minority community of marginalized community members. It will be a full life science park. We're not only having Lucas Pop Bio, but the other anchor tenant would be Heliplex, which is an accelerator for life science startups to actually come in and manufacture their prototypes, so particularly seed-level companies, and then it will also double as a workforce development program that we'll get into later. And then the last piece of that campus is affordable housing with mixed retail, so first-time homeowners people that need that discounted leverage for the salaries that they bring in, and then also a section off for people participating in workforce development that may need some additional help while participating in that program. Just to give you a bit of background, my education, I'm an alum of Howard University, where I studied biology. I have a master's in business from Full Sail University, a master's in regulatory science from University of Southern California, and just received an honorary doctorate from Thomas Jefferson University. I think I'm the face, or I am the face of what biotech is looking like now, what it's going to look like next as we move forward. But this is not anything new. It's just something that's been ignored. So as we talk about Equity Day, I just want to remind or offer a little bit of insight to say it just really, medicinal procedures and surgical operations really begin in Africa, particularly Egypt. They were the first to discover things like cancer, syphilis, chlamydia, surgical operations to mend bones. And then as we move forward, African Americans and people of African descent continue to participate in this industry. You have Dr. Percy Levon Julian, who was the first African American man to own a biomanufacturing facility, but also developed a mass production process for cortisone and progesterone. So he is the real grandfather of the biopharmaceutical industry. You have Dr. Charles Drew, who invented the blood banking system and how we do blood transfusions that we still do today. You have the Tuskegee Airmen experiment, unfortunately and fortunately in some retrospect. And then last but not least, you have Henrietta Lacks, whose cervical cells are literally the foundation of this $1 trillion industry that we built here in Western medicine. And so I just want to impart on you to remember, as we talk about manufacturing, to make sure we continue to talk about the equity piece, but also understand that the Industrial Revolution has always involved African Americans from down south, unfortunately with slavery with the cotton, all the way up to the Industrial Revolution back in the day when folks started migrating up to the Midwest to work in the steel mills and some of the other industrial companies at that time. And Lucas Pop Bio is at the forefront of that. Our C-suite is around 85-95% of people of African descent, 50% women. So we're really integrated and making sure that not only are we actively participating in this industry and doing the work to get the drugs that the patient needs, but also making it an equitable table for all members of America and around the globe to participate, not just as patients, but as employees, entrepreneurs, and all the way up to the C-suite. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, all right.
Okay. So we're going to break it down a little
Yeah.
bit. Go ahead. I know you have some things you want to say about Tia Lyles-Williams.
Right, and you do too.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing, like I said before we started talking, is that she is the face of equity, and the reason that I say that is because on her website, or I found a little thing on Forbes' website about her. It was a little thing, and it said she's African American or queer African American. Okay, she. And as she just said, her C-suite, meaning the executives at her company, are 85% African American and 50% women. Now, the problem with that is that, that's great, fine,
Yeah,
cool.
that's great.
But you have to remember that that's the executives.
Right.
Okay, that's not the entire company.
Right.
Now, if it was the entire company, then I could say, okay, well, yeah, she's meeting those sort of equitable goals that they seem to always be reaching for, say
But
that they are.
that's the C-suite level.
That's the C-suite level,
Yeah.
right? These are people who are, they went to the best schools.
Right. They didn't grow up in the hood like where we live now.
Right. And she may have
Yeah.
originally, but she got some opportunities. And this is something to remember about equity and when they talk about equity. And that is that equity is about outcomes, not
Exactly.
not possibilities or not opportunities.
Opportunity. Right.
Right.
It's
Okay.
about outcomes, not opportunity.
Right. So box checking.
Right.
The other thing, and her business is called Lucas Pie Bio, and it's spelled Pye, but like pronounced pie, like what you eat, So Lucas Pie Bio, I found it kind of interesting how she like basically threw the kitchen sink into that. And we're also having, affordable housing in
Yeah,
our
we're
in our
doing this.
complex.
We're doing that. Like every sector was represented in that short speech. So what I want to do then is focus on the imagery and the delivery of the woman herself.
Okay.
So first of all, if you're watching this 4-hour summit, you see that she is sandwiched in between an old long-haired white dude who sort of represents the old school version of biotech or the biosciences.
I wanted to talk about him. But go ahead.
So she was also sandwiched in between someone that looks like your favorite aunt with like a sweater. She was one of the spokes people or one of the MCs.
The panel. Was she the MC? Oh, was she
one of them?
Yeah.
There were quite a few of them.
Yeah.
She was also somebody of note. But anyway, so they had Tia Lyles-Williams, who's, the shape of a linebacker, black and queer, sandwiched in between sort of like the old guard, the old version of what you would think of biosciences and life sciences and biotechnology. So that was an image that was done on purpose, that was curated on purpose for the viewers who watched this 4-hour summit. And the other thing I noticed about Tia, and I have to commend her for this, is that I do believe she was the only person on this panel which had, I want to say probably anywhere between, say, 50 and 75 people, maybe 50 people presenting their case, representing,
we need money.
right, representing their industries. She was the only one, as far as I know, that did not read from a script. She had memorized her 3 minutes and had practiced until she had it down pat. I could easily see her standing in front of a mirror and recording herself and timing herself and practicing for, weeks on end, if not, maybe days on end before she was to make her presentation at the summit. This is important. She wanted to be the standout figure, so they put her in between the old guard, the old guy with the long hair, sort of like what you would see at your high school life sciences teacher,
Right.
kind of grizzled around the end. He's got like a little bottle of whiskey under the desk, probably, or goes out and smokes pot, after class, right? And then on the other side of her, you had this, older woman, sort of, wearing a sweater, white hair, really kind, really, really friendly and really into, supporting life sciences and technology and all that. So the whole thing, the way it was presented or the way it was curated was something you also want to pay attention to in situations like this.
Right.
The fact that she was the only one that did not read from her script, she had it memorized, was something to remember.
That's interesting. Something that she mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen, as well as, and I can't remember the woman's name, but the woman that she was talking about who contributed, who's like the foundation of, biotech. Right. And the reason that she is the foundation is that without her permission, she had this unique ability to kill cancer cells within her body, and her doctor or some clinician exploited that. They took samples of her blood and plasma and cells or something. I can't remember the entire story. I remember hearing about this, of all things, on NPR about a dozen years ago.
I feel like I know what that feels like.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. Basically, those cells were used. She eventually died, but those cells were used as the base for all kinds of research. And the cell line is named for her. And again, I can't remember the woman's name because she kind of glossed over it. But the reason that I bring this up is that she glossed over it. And she glossed over the airmen too, because she said, unfortunately, fortunately.
Right, unfortunately and fortunately.
So basically, she is not to be trusted ultimately, because, even though she says, she talks about equity, she talks a good game about it. Going back to my comment about the executive suite, the C-suite is 85% African American, but again, these are the elite. So we're not talking about, as we come back to all the time, the world, what is going on is not about racism, it's about class. And they use racism as a way of hiding the differences in class. What you have is a class of people. A lot of them are black, some of them are white, some of them are Latino or whatever, okay? But the point is that they're focusing on race and not class.
Exactly. So the woman that you are referring to is Henrietta Lacks.
Correct.
The Legacy of Henrietta Lacks.
Right.
Lacks.
Yes.
So you guys should look her up and see how she was exploited for her
cell lines.
health,
Yeah.
her cell lines, and her own personal health protocols.
Right.
So, that's a sad story.
It really is.
But unfortunately, through time and media and propaganda, it will be twisted
Mm-hmm.
into something that.
She was doing that right there.
Yeah.
So we
So-
take these people.
So
who
what
have
you're
been,
saying is Tia Lyles-Williams was twisting the Henrietta Lacks story into something that wasn't quite
right.
true
So
to history.
she's further exploiting Henrietta Lacks by lifting her up as a hero, as a foundation of biotechnology, instead of talking about the exploitation.
Right, exactly. Well, I guess if you want to have a piece of a $30 trillion pie, the last thing you want to do is talk about how, the same people that would be scratching off the checks were the same people historically that have exploited human beings in the past. So you don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
These are lines of people that probably owned people like Tia.
Now, on the total opposite end of the spectrum.
In a different way. They owned her in a different way.
Right.
She's owned now, but in a different way than then.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the total opposite end of the spectrum, as far as looks and everything, is a guy by the name of Doug Friedman. And he's with a company that came about within the last 2 years, so during the age of COVID, called Biomade. I believe he's the CEO of Biomade.
Yeah.
And he talks about how it's hard to believe that they've only been around for 2 years. So
and
pay attention to this guy. Now,
Right.
he's on the complete opposite image spectrum. He sits, how he mentioned that Tia Lyles-Williams was sandwiched in between the old guy and the old woman. Well, you've got Doug Friedman sitting on the other side of the old guy. So
Before we go too much further, because we're going to get away from this section of the summit, but the old guy that you keep talking about, he is like the CEO of a company. I can't remember the name of it, and basically they make bioplastic. So they make the PLA plastic. So that the applications are for water bottles and other types of plastics. And the reason that he's there, he's like you said, he's the old school
Right. He's the old guard.
biotechnology, right?
Right.
And biomanufacturing. I mean, this stuff has been around for at least 20 years.
Right.
Maybe
So
15.
he's not going to get as much of that $30 trillion pie as the rest of these innovators.
Right, but
right?
he's fitting into the eco side of things, right? So
Sure.
he's like, our plastic breaks down in the environment, even in the marine world. So this falls into the whole idea of plastic pollution, which is the only pollution that these people ever talk about. Right? They don't talk about air pollution. They don't talk about water pollution. They don't talk about land being poisoned.
They don't talk about anything that would really matter, like chemicals seeping into our water supply through outdated infrastructure.
Right. Or even through industrial
waste.
Yeah.
They
and
don't
things
talk
like that,
about
or fracking, or
they
something
just
like
talk
that.
about plastic bottles, and there's so much more involved with pollution and trash that's so dangerous.
He used the S word, the straw.
Oh God! Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
his straws break down in the environment because it's made out of it's a natural based product.
Right.
So
let's get on to Doug Friedman, and we're gonna play his portion, and if we need to follow up regarding him, we will. But let's just listen.
All right.
Can you talk a little bit about your being a bridge on this scale-up point and just briefly explain kind of how that works?
Sure. I'll tell a very brief story that I think clearly articulates what is going on here. When Biomade was negative 18 months old, so about a year and a half before Biomade existed, the Engineering Biology Research Consortium pulled together as many companies as would show up in a room to talk about what does the industry need to be successful as an industry, right? To do exactly what we're talking about. And it was a listening session. The number one thing that came up, literally every company who showed up in one way or another brought up scale-up infrastructure. Now, it turned out at the time that was like the only thing off the table. So we're really grateful to the DoD for stepping up in a serious way right now to throw that on the table. But that's what we heard. And we heard story after story about how companies were getting to the point where they've developed a set of underlying technology. They have products that they sort of know how to make. We can get into that if we have time. But they need to scale them to the point where they're making a relevant amount of material so customers can test them. And virtually all of them were going outside of the US. And so this idea of how do we think about scale-up infrastructure in a networked and cohesive manner that's able to capture the most relevant parts of the chemicals market. And so the other aspect of this to bring up that I really appreciate Christoph commenting on the scale that Gino is talking about is still small compared to the industrial chemicals market. I urge you to just think of the petroleum industry, the whole thing. That's what we're talking about, right? That is what we are talking about. That is the scale of carbon that we are talking about. And in order for that to have a meaningful impact, in order for all of these technologies to have a meaningful impact, as quickly as possible, companies need to spin out a kilogram, a few kilograms, a ton of product so that customers, like the DoD, for example, can go test that, right? How does that work in a system that is relevant, right? How do we get that in the hands of customers quickly? How do companies fail in product development quickly, right? When you have to wait a long time and go overseas, that's a lot of money, right? You're burning money, a product fails, now all of a sudden you don't have any money, your company goes out of business, right? That is a pretty bad place for the industry to be if companies are going out of business when their first or second product fails. You've got to be able to iterate quickly. And so the idea of how scale up manufacturing and what role CDMOs in the bioindustrial space work is a real opportunity now. And I think this initiative provides a really strong foundation that now many federal agencies, and I really hope Congress, take some ownership over and say, if we're going to do it, we have to do it right now because we are already behind, but we have an opportunity to catch up, and we have an opportunity to catch up in a way that the companies build their manufacturing capacity here.
I'll add one more comment to that, and that is that we care a lot about what the demand signal is too, because for the DoD, if we need to have it in the industrial base. If you can't make it, we can't buy it, and it doesn't help us. So we're launching the Tri-Service Biotechnology for Resilient Supply Chain with $270 million over the next 5 years in order to be able to bring that bio-based materials, fuels, fire-resistant materials, polymers, resins, we can go on and on as to what we have and what our need is, but to start to bring that into the supply chain, because that demand signal will be huge as far as being able to qualify it, get it into the system, and have it there for the DoD and move it forward. So I think that's one of the things that we're doing right now that will be helpful.
Say one thing, Doris, yeah.
We have to do this for biology too. We have to think about the bioproducts.
Great. Okay, speaking of, thank you for that,
Okay.
the bioproducts and also CMOs, etc.
Okay.
You want to talk a little bit about your finance?
Okay. So I don't remember if he continues here or not.
Let's just play for one sec.
Halfway?
Okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
So-
All right. So yeah, they're
So-
coming back to Tia.
Now, I know you have a lot to say, and this is,
Go ahead.
I guess what he, in a previous, again, this was 4 hours and it took us a long time to kind of go through this, but in a previous segment, he had talked about who he was and how Biomade, his company, has only been around for 2 years. And I really wanted to stress that point, that they were able to get the funding and slip in under the radar during the age of COVID in order to push forward this biotechnology. There's a couple of other things I want to say about the aesthetics of this video. But go ahead.
No, finish up.
Okay, so where he is positioned is really interesting. He is at the end of the table. Behind, and when you look at him speaking, the visuals are so noisy. He's got a thick, cumbersome looking podium behind him. He is also at the very end of the table where all the water bottles are stacked, and he's kind of tall and lanky, and he's a millennial, and he's wearing a suit and tie.
Right.
And so when he gestures his arms, you're kind of like hoping that he doesn't knock over the bottles of water. He's very well spoken. He gives a nod frequently to the Department of Defense. And that woman that you heard speaking at the end is Barbara McQuiston, who is with the Department of Defense. And she also is sitting at the end of the table. So they are sharing a table. There's 5 people in between them, and they are bookended.
Exactly.
They
I
are
was thinking the same thing, yeah.
bookends. The Department of Defense is one bookend, and Biomade, this organization that obviously got funding from the Department of Defense, is the other bookend. And so it's really important that when these summits are curated and established who's going to sit where, this is not by accident. Okay? I just wanted to put that out there. The visuals are really important in this. So,
yeah, and he's just he's so squeaky clean.
He's super squeaky clean. He's the opposite of Tia Lyles-Williams, who they give the floor to again after he speaks. And I think this is the second portion of his his speech, because there's a whole other portion where he talks about Biomade and what it does and how long it's been in existence.
Right.
But
and he talked about his company as being sort of a bridge between the government and other companies.
Exactly.
And and I have a feeling it's that they do servicing for other biochemical or bio manufacturing companies. I'm not exactly sure. I just briefly looked at their website, so you can go to biomade.com, I think, and it's there, and you can see that. But but he's got that sort of squeaky clean American, military kind of, he's not in the military, but he interfaces with them,
sure.
right?
He interfaces enough with them that he knows how to speak to the public sector. Obviously, he's very animated. He's very good to look at. He's very charming.
And he's very corporate and very in a lot of ways and very beige too, right?
Right.
So, but he mentioned the fact that he is basically in bed with the Department of Defense.
Yeah, to admit that is pretty.
Now, a couple of the things that he mentioned. One is that. He mentioned carbon and basically, the whole idea of carbon and what they're up against in the chemical industry, and he said basically the oil industry. Now, I think that what's going on here with this, both with this executive order and this summit and this whole idea of this new bio-based economy, is that they're signaling to us that the oil industry is basically on the way out, and if the oil industry isn't on its way out, it's at least pivoting into this other area of energy, right? So I didn't see anybody representing any of the oil companies, because I think that would have been bad optics. But clearly they are not going down, going, oh gosh, we're dinosaurs, we're gonna just go away. No, they're getting into these things, right?
Yeah.
They're investing in solar, they're investing in a lot of other things, even though they say they're not. Okay. But the thing about that is that sounds like Nixon. The thing about that is this, and that is that the reason that we're getting all of this propaganda around electric vehicles and carbon and all that is because the carbon-based industry is basically going away, because it's becoming, just like slavery, impossible to support anymore. It's not. They're not able to cheaply extract these materials and commodities as cheaply or as easily as they did in the past. And so, and yet, even though the world economy is still based on oil as its energy source, these people are saying, no, it's no longer going to be about that. It's going to be about this, and they're doing that to kind of like. I think it's a way of just like with slavery, it was a way of saving face for the reason that this thing is going away. The reason that oil is going away and that coal is going away is because it's too expensive to extract it. It's too expensive to produce it. And so, like with slavery, when, the underwriters and the insurers said we can no longer, show any value, we cannot show any ROI on this chattel that you own, they got out of that and they shifted position, and the Industrial Revolution allowed for the shift from slavery into wage slavery. This is a similar shift. This is a similar pivot from, the carbon-based economy and carbon. It's a shift from that over to bio-based.
The bioeconomy.
The bioeconomy.
Yeah, and they talk about that pivot too.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually use the
but
term
they're
pivot
not
here and there.
framing it in
they're
a
not
way
framing it that way.
because
they are talking about a pivot, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go on to the third individual that we wanted to highlight.
Yeah.
Her name is Dr. Nina Tandon, and she's a co-founder of the first company to grow human bones.
Ooh,
and so she's at the table, too, wanting a piece of that $30 trillion pie.
Okay. Here we go. Oh, we've got it on mute there.
Despite the incredible advances in medical science over the past, throughout human history, we ended up with a situation in which the vast majority of us, 75% or more of us, will be eventually acquiring parts of our bodies that we weren't born with. Bone is the most transplanted human material after blood, and we are replacing millions of joints per year, oftentimes because of just a couple millimeters of damaged cartilage. I'm an electrical engineer, went to community college after Cooper Union and pivoted to this space, so thank you for your comments on that, and ended up in the lab with Bob Langer at MIT, which was a really wonderful place to explore this work. So the only way to get human bone until now is to cut it out of a human. What we do at EpiBone is we take the cells that grow our bodies in the first place, repair our bodies every day, and extract them and put them into a biomaterial, culture them, and we've got, after 3 weeks, we can make bone, 4 weeks we can make cartilage. And last year we made history as the first biotechnology greenlit by the FDA to use this approach in humans. We have now successfully, as of August 25th, completed our phase 1/2 implantations, first in man, first in class therapy, really happy about that. We're painting a world, a picture of a world in which, we don't need to replace parts of our bodies with metal, plastic. We can be the medicine. Okay, I'm trying to go really quickly here. The U.S. is poised to be a leader in this space for obvious reasons, historical reasons, and we have the key ingredients to keep our space as the front runner in spades. We are a magnet for talent and venture capital. However, policy can help us tip the balance to realizing our potential, and I see 2 key areas where we could really use help. Firstly, despite the fact that surgeons are allowed by the FDA to use banked bones for any of our 207 bones or 360 joints throughout our bodies, the FDA currently requires companies like ours to undergo lengthy 3-phase trials for each, or maybe even more than 207 trials in order to realize all the various products that we could. We have a platform technology patchwork regulation. And what this means, considering that OTAT has only approved 24 products in their history, that is a insurmountable kind of challenge. So what I would ask is for us to think holistically about a regulatory framework in which surrogate tissues and organs can be regulated as such. We are not a device, we are not a therapeutic, we are not a biosimilar. Secondly, one of the tenets of our field, and many of you would agree here, is that the process is the product. Meaning that we're very high touch, lots of human manipulation involved in producing these products, labor intensive. The labor intensiveness of living therapies translates to highly skilled jobs. The perishable nature of our products translates to local production. And the necessity of strict regulations and IP protection means that regional hubs will emerge to serve various geographies across borders. We are seeing Singapore position itself very strategically to service APAC by increasing in biomanufacturing, investment in biomanufacturing capacity. I would like to see us be the world leader in export of human engineered tissues. So I firmly believe in a future in which we as humans can be our own medicine. Let us not replace parts of our bodies with parts cut out of ourselves and other people. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective, and so excited about this moment we all find ourselves in. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Did she have like a little blue streak in her hair?
Possibly. So yeah, let's talk about her image for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, she's very corporate.
Very, very corporate, but very attractive, young. Sitting next to an attractive young Indian man, probably about her age, millennial age, I would say, maybe even younger.
Yeah.
They also had her positioned at the end of the table in front of the American flag. So if you were to watch this video and they focus on her 3 minutes that she was given in her speech, you would see the American flag hanging behind her.
Right.
Another thing about her too that was really, really different compared to every single person sitting at the table is what she wore. She wore a blazer over, some kind of blouse or whatever. That's fine. That's very corporate. But it was shiny.
Yeah, it was
and
really
sparkly.
Yeah.
It was a sparkly blazer. So she...
With the sleeves rolled up too.
With the sleeves kind of rolled
How
up.
new wave.
So she represents the aspect of this country, or the people that would watch her to go, wow, this sounds really exciting, I want to be a part of that. Humans being their own medicine, humans healing themselves, that sounds really cool and hip and innovative.
Yep.
Imagery again is very important. This again is not a mistake. These are done by design in order to appeal to the different sectors that would be watching this, or the different demographics that would be watching this.
Yeah, I agree. And so she, the fact that she was in front of the American flag, that was interesting that you pointed that out. I didn't notice that for some reason. But she was talking about foreign countries like Singapore that are trying to lead in this sector that she's talking about, that her business is in. And so she wants to take that, basically eat their lunch and take that away. And to do that, she needs deregulation from the United States government so that her company doesn't have to go through, these multiple hoops in order to get her product into people's bodies, right? She's like, doctors are allowed to use banked bones. And bones bone material that already exists from dead people, and that's something she said.
It's really macabre.
Or even in your case when you had the implant for your jaw, right? They used like cow material, right? Bovine material from bone. Of course it was it was sterilized and whatever.
And,
I mean, but it was a material that allowed, your body to fuse with that existing bone. So doctors use banked bones. So these and then her business has to go through, multiple trials and has all this regulation piling up that keeps her from, getting ahead and beating Singapore, right? So, and then of course she had to use the J word. She says, and we produce jobs, high quality jobs, and jobs and jobs and jobs.
Sure.
And she didn't go into that, but she was pushing that idea. And again, we're talking about professional jobs, not everyday jobs.
Right.
And something somebody we're not featuring in this. In these clips was talking about how they're opening their facilities in poor neighborhoods,
right?
And then
They're
he was
focusing
talking about
on the poor neighborhoods,
right? So
yeah,
there's an area of Pittsburgh that we know is targeted for something like that. So I have a feeling that all these brownfields that exist where steel mills used to be. Are going to be, here in the Pittsburgh Allegheny County area will be, rife with this kind of like development, right?
Yeah, it's a shame that we don't have the time to pull that segment and play it. but he actually said that. This individual said, let's look at the steel mill industry and look at, what they innovated back in the day, and it's going to be the same kind of thing. So visually, you would see a steel mill in your mind's eye. You would visualize that in your imagination, and you would apply it to these build out of these biotech facilities. So it's going to be like I mentioned yesterday in my September 16th hour-long audio, it's going to be the communities that are poorer than poor, communities that are completely blighted, have no tax base, that these industry leaders will walk into those community council ramshackle governments, where it's just a few people put together to make up a town council. They're going to run roughshod over these people and say, we're going to do this. And whether you like it or not, we're going to build these places out in these old, abandoned, lots where the steel mills used to sit.
Right.
And it was very obvious that that's going to be where they're going to focus their growth in these deeply impoverished areas, like places that are so forgotten, probably even worse than like the neighborhood of poverty we live in, hidden away so that they can't really be under any scrutiny. They don't really provide any benefit to the local community, and they can continue to generate income without really producing anything of value.
Right. And, for instance, I was referring to this one area of Pittsburgh that, is slated for something like this, a bio and robot facility.
Isn't CMU involved, Carnegie Mellon?
Carnegie Mellon. And Biden was here and even talking it up, right? So, but the thing that about these places, it's not that they're just like moving in and taking over these spaces and not really providing anything for the community around them. In a lot of cases, they have a detrimental effect on the community around them. For instance, this place that we're talking about in Pittsburgh, we had a guest on Bookmark about a year ago, our friend Zig, who's part of an organization that's fighting a road being put through their neighborhood that will do nothing more than to act as a function for like a tram that will take people from the university district to where CMU and Pitt University are, to this facility, which goes over some hills and through a little valley. But this little valley is a neighborhood, and this neighborhood has been ignored and kicked around, and even to the point where they have severe flooding when it rains a lot, and severe flooding, and that the idea of the city going in to fix that flooding issue infrastructure is tied to whether or not they get this road put into place for these trams to go, trambling through whatever the word is, through their neighborhood without any benefit to the neighborhood.
Right. So Pittsburgh reminds me a lot of San Francisco, where you have these little alcove neighborhoods where they're like in little valleys and crested along the sides of hills, and it's very difficult to get around. And she's a cyclist, so she knows how, and she grew up here, so she knows how to navigate through these really, really steep hills and valleys and things like that to get to where she needs to go. But it's very disruptive when you put in these trolleys or these trams. Now, in San Francisco, they did it in a way that it wasn't so invasive.
Right.
Especially with the streetcars.
Yeah, well, that was there before a lot of us were around. But that was there
before a lot of... So what we're talking about is a neighborhood that has done fine for itself, being in this little valley kind of thing, and it's very cute. I mean, it's very quaint.
Yeah, we've been to this neighborhood, and it's
very sweet.
It's a very cool little place, even though it's really run down, but it's very cool.
It's like everything in Pittsburgh is very run down, but it's pretty self-sustaining. I mean, you've got like an old family business that serves like the best, what are those things called?
Calzones?
I guess, yeah, those huge calzones that are the size of a small child, you know, like, and it's been there for like 100 years. So it's pretty self-sustaining, and the homes there are pretty much owned, and you know, it's a very good community, and the last thing you want is this, you know, this tram or this train zipping through this community, disrupting everything, just so that the CMU students and the biotech people can get to a thing that's not really going to benefit the community anyway,
exactly.
and actually create more problems.
Right.
So
In fact, there won't even be jobs for those tram operators because they're going to be autonomous.
Going to be autonomous trams that run on robots, you know, whatever, AI, basically.
Yeah.
So the last person that we have, actually the second to the last, I'm going to try to incorporate the last person, you know, I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
But the second to the last person we have is Lisa Dyson.
Okay.
She is the CEO of something called Kiverty, and JP has a lot to say about this, or at least, you know.
I wanted to bring her in because, you know,
it's just,
in the words of Ebenezer Scrooge, oh Spirit, I fear you most of all.
Yeah,
right.
So we'll go ahead and bring her up, and then. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she's frightening. Okay.
Along this sort of sustainability theme, I'd like to turn to Dr. Dyson. So I did Google you. I watched a lot of your videos, and I've heard you talk a lot about a sustainable future. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, and where does biotechnology fit into that?
Absolutely. So wonderful to be here. And I'll start by talking about how I got here. So my mother's from Louisiana, and I went there a lot as a kid, but I went back in 2005 to a very different reality. After Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, I was one of the many people who went to try to help rebuild the city. And at that point, it became very clear to me just the devastating impact of weather events. That was my first time really seeing the devastating impact of weather events. And as weather events become more frequent and more intense, you know, my question was, how could I be a part of the solution? So ultimately started a company called Kiverty and then Air Protein with Dr. John Reed and James White to really attack that issue. And so as we try to innovate to solve some of the problems, you know, thinking outside the box is necessary. In our case, we actually thought outside the planet, going to another governmental agency, NASA, during the space program in the 60s and 70s. They had the question, if we were to send astronauts on long space journeys, how could we feed them very effectively if they're gone for a year or more? And of course, if you leave the planet with carbon, you don't pick up any along the way. You have to figure out how to recycle it. And so one of the ideas they came up with was to use elements of the air, essentially, to create nutrients and create closed-loop carbon cycles. So we picked up where they left off and began working on a way to take elements of the air to manufacture products, and ultimately with Air Protein, food. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is that the food industry produces more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. And it is a huge contributor to deforestation. 2019 saw record fires in Brazil to make room for cattle grazing. So that's something that we're really focused on addressing. And so with the technology that we're commercializing now, making food, essentially protein being kind of the biggest culprit in all of this, the way that we make meat specifically, making that from elements of the air in a way that's nutritious, all the essential amino acids, vitamins and minerals, vitamin B12 and other things, so that we can deliver really cleaner, greener solutions for our progeny. So as we, this is a very exciting time. A lot of people work hard on, leading up to this initiative. I'm excited that it's being announced and that there's an effort to invest in advancing the bioeconomy. And as we do that, we can think about, when my grandparents were farmers, back in, when they were born, early 1900s, there were 1.6 billion people on the planet. Now, we're almost at 8 billion, we'll be at 10 billion by 2050. We really do have to figure out how to solve some of the big challenges out there. And the bioeconomy really is going to be a part of that. And so I'm excited with this announcement and to be here today.
Okay. Yeah. She sounded nice. Why is she so scary?
Right. So let's take a look at the aesthetics again, which are really important. Again, done by design, sitting at the end of the table.
So this is earlier in the summit with a different group. They had like several
right.
portions or parts of the summit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
Different moderator,
different moderators
group of,
for each group, right? So she, in this particular group, she is sitting again at the end of the table and is wearing a white jacket, which is very, it really stands out with a red blouse underneath, which really stands out with the rest of, what everybody else is wearing. So, glasses, the aesthetics there are not as obvious as some of the other ones that I've been describing, but still, the white jacket really does stand out. So I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, that refers to,
and then the
clinics,
fact that,
right? Or
right.
medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fact that exactly like the white lab coat or the white doctor's coat. And the fact that she's also at the end of the table, like a bookend.
Right.
Like this.
Well, they have two black women bookended on
and
this,
all white people in between them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, we got an Indian dude in there, but yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
What do you have?
So there's
to
your
say?
equity.
Exactly. What do you have to say about this?
Oh my God.
While you talk, I'm going to actually rewind this.
To find that other person? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So she talks about air protein and air farming. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And so what that is that fits into what they're calling, alternative food sources. Okay, she didn't use that phrase, but that's what I believe is what they mean by that. There's probably other things, like everybody's going to go, JP, they mean grasshoppers, which, they might, but I doubt it.
Crickets,
crickets. Cricket flour to make biscuits with. No. They're going to be more sophisticated than that.
Yeah.
And so what I thought was interesting is she's like, well, we went to NASA and we looked at their technology and they came up with closed loop carbon cycles. You leave with some carbon, but you don't pick any up. And I'm thinking, okay, she's basically talking the opposite of what everybody else is talking about. Carbon bad. She's saying carbon is good, and she's correct, because carbon is the life force. It's like what we're made of, right? We need carbon in the environment. And everybody's talking about how there's too much carbon, and there I don't believe that there is too much carbon personally. I think there's as much carbon in the environment as there always has been.
Well, a lot of the conspiracy theorists out there are creating memes that say, carbon reduction actually means, that they want to reduce the population.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to reduce you, the human.
So what she's doing in ways of like carbon reduction is not necessarily carbon reduction, but she's pulling carbon out of the air to create a food source. And so she's talking about pulling nutrients out of the air and carbon and nutrients out of the air to make food source, which is like, okay, well, but here, this begs the question. Don't we need those nutrients and things in the air that she's pulling out to make food? Don't we need those things to live and to survive? So this points to that very meme that you're describing, just in a more sophisticated level.
Right.
But then she focuses on like the cattle industry and how it's responsible for greenhouse gases, which is another phrase, another word that gets used in the executive order and gets used a few times in this summit. Greenhouse gases, which warm the planet, which blah, blah, blah. And it's, carbon, greenhouse gases, and, basically she's referring to cow farts as being, responsible for warming the planet.
Oh, come on.
And
as opposed to all the pollution.
As opposed to all the pollution, as opposed to a lot of the things that are going on in the background, especially from the Department of Defense. The military creates more greenhouse gases if you're going to go there. If you're going to use this terminology and these things, they produce more of that shit in the world than any other sector in the world.
Right.
Okay? So, don't talk to me about cow farts. Okay? And this is, again, coming back to the idea of what I was talking about, taking people off the land, changing their lives, changing, lifestyles, but not only just lifestyles, but like how you live and how you make a living. I am a lifelong vegetarian, and we did feature a cattle man on
one of our
interviews, and I don't agree with everything that he says, but I agree that it is a form, it is a way of life, and it's a way of making a living that's kind of honest,
Yeah.
And so I don't have a problem. I do have a problem with the big feedlots. Okay, like we used to see in California,
Right.
that would stink up Highway 5.
Right.
Okay, but I don't have a problem with a lot of agriculture that's out there.
We live so close to so much agriculture here in PA now.
Yeah.
The Amish are a good example of how their sustainable practices are good for the earth and good for humans.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something else that I was thinking about. All these people are talking about, green and, carbon and all this kind of stuff. And they're talking about new food sources and new ways of raising food and agriculture and all this kind of thing. And it's like, okay, so basically what they want to do is take the existing conventional agriculture of petrochemicals, fertilizers, and insecticides, take that away, take that off the table, which is fine, and replace it with what they're proposing. Now, what they're proposing is just equally the same. It's industrialization of food, industrialization of farming. And they're using, different types of chemicals, different types of approaches that probably and could be, I don't know, I'm just speculating here, they could be just as detrimental to the land as what they're replacing because of the scale, because of the industrialization. Now, organic food and organic food production has been around for probably, has been officially recognized as an industry for at least the last 30 years. And I have a feeling that it was established, like the USDA organic stamp of approval was established just, it was to like bring that into the economy, but I think it was also used as a means of saying, look, we've tried organics before, and they just can't scale up to the level we need to feed everybody. And I've heard this from other people.
And that's just not true.
I don't think that that's true. I think that basically, if they took the approach that they're taking with this bullshit,
right,
with this idea of, making food in a new way, and applied it to small family farms, and applied it to more horizontal agriculture
and just traditional
methods, that it would be fine. They would be able to feed everybody, okay? And on more of a local level, so you wouldn't have all this shipping of produce across the country, right?
Right.
So so I guess what I'm trying to say is that this will be like organic. I think that organic production of food will become the future naturopathic medicine. They're going to start finding a way to demean organic food production in different ways, and demonize it, right? And make it to the point to where it's like, oh, you want organic? Oh, you're a Luddite. You're a climate denier.
Exactly. They're going to equate being a Trump supporter with eating organic food, just like the Netflix TV show or the Netflix show that came out. It's got 5 episodes to it, but one of them concentrated their efforts on demeaning and diminishing the essential oil industry, saying that essential oils were nothing more than snake oil salesmen, essential oils
were detrimental
providers,
to people,
and that not only that, this $1 trillion industry
which
had
is not.
caused more damage to people, and so much so that I have a local friend that has actually come to me and said, please stop doing this. I know that you like
these products.
I know that you like essential oils. I love the way they smell, but I watched this Netflix thing, and now I'm like super scared for your health. And I'm just like, okay, thanks for your concern, but I don't think that an aspect of a flour being compressed into an oil is really going to harm me as much as, say, like a pharmaceutical where they make hundreds of trillions of dollars, well, maybe not that much, but tens of trillions of dollars
Lots of money anyway.
You know, and
Yeah.
people are dropping dead right and left.
Right,
So
exactly.
I'm just like, really, so that's what it's going to come to, where they
Right.
really demonized and villainized and vilified the naturopathic industry, so
Right.
much so that, you know, naturopath doctors, physicians, people that practice holistic medicine are being targeted by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
They've wound up at the bottom of canyons. They've
Yeah,
had
they've
their cars
died-
exploded.
died mysteriously.
They've died
Yeah.
mysteriously, you know, in their homes. Like, it's all this crazy stuff that's happening to them. Now I'm concerned that the organic foods market, if it's not allowed to be co-opted by the biotech industry, that it will be.
Yeah.
Like, it will be villainized.
Exactly. And
the same
so
way.
the last point I want to make about Liza Dyson's
Lisa
Dyson.
Lisa Dyson.
Her comments was, you know, basically she's saying carbon is good, and this got me to thinking. It's like, well, why has carbon been demonized so much? Well, why would you demonize something that exists and make sure that, you know, everybody is against it and make it so that, you know, we have to get rid of it? Well, what if you could make money from it? Well, now you're taking a product, or you're taking something in the environment that nobody wants around, and you're making money with it. Why else would they do that?
Right.
Carbon sequestration. Why would you do that? Well,
Right.
so you have you make money
Yeah.
from the carbon you collect from the environment and turn it into something.
Like a credit.
Well, not even credits. I mean, that's one aspect of it, but like
credits, yeah.
turning it into, you know, food, or turning
Right.
it into chemicals, or
Right.
a lot of these people are talking about using carbon to turn into something else.
Right.
And now some of them are talking about waste stream product. Okay, that's fine. I get it. That's great. But, you know, the problem is, you know, why, you know, they're basically replacing the very thing that they are using as you know, from, you know, the waste into something else.
It's so
and
dumb. Yeah.
it's just going to continue on in the same sort of
Yeah.
industrial complex.
Right.
But, you know, so carbon is now a means of making money. That's why it's being talked about in such a negative way.
Right.
This is my speculation, but I think that I'm
Yeah.
spot
No,
on with
no,
that.
you're always right about stuff like that.
Okay.
So before I play the very last speaker at this White House summit, I'd like to just do a broad overview.
Okay.
So first of all, they used each and every speaker, or you know, every other speaker, used the term attack pretty regularly.
Yeah, you're right.
In their delivery.
Yeah.
And so this tells me that this is a military exercise,
Yeah.
that this biotech, biomanufacturing, and bioengineering executive order, which was signed on September 12th, is going to be treated as if it is going on the offense, as if we need to be in some kind of wartime scenario.
Yeah.
So even these people from industry or from sectors that don't have anything to do with the military, they're using military terms. They're saying we have to go on the offensive, we have to beat China, we have to attack. Like, and so that kind of language is really something you want to pay attention to with these summit meetings. Again, they're equating it with the space race. We have to beat China in this industry. China has offered their country as a space for this industry, but we have, we in our particular sectors, representing our particular companies, have turned away from those offers because we believe that the U.S. government should be supporting our endeavors. So, it's clear through this entire summit that this was sort of propped up by the Department of Defense. Like the Department of Defense
absolutely.
kind of like curated this and made it happen.
Yeah, I agree.
And
because they come up so often in these discussions, and that language that you're talking about, I agree with you 100%. In fact, China comes up several times. In fact, I'm going to go back to Lisa real quick. She mentioned, fires in Brazil.
Oh, fires in Brazil.
Fires in Brazil, for cattle raising and stuff. But, the thing is that really, it's not necessarily cattle that's being raised. It's also soybeans and other commodities that are being raised for China.
Right.
Okay, so
right.
this is South American countries working for China by raising food for them, for China,
Right.
So that's another thing. You know, we have to eat China's lunch, basically. We have to take away their means of feeding themselves, you know, through other countries. But also then earlier I said something about, you know, I wanted to come back to China in regard to them being ahead. And from what I've heard and read in a couple places is they're already into the idea of biocomputing, using biomaterials to store information like we do now with hard drives and flash drives and things like that. Biomaterials can hold a lot more information than magnetic or whatever else we use to store information on currently. And there's this exploration into biomaterials as a means of computing. And I think that the U.S. is behind them, and that's another reason for this summit and for the urgency around the language in this. And they're looking at it as a security issue. You know,
in their eyes, it is a national security issue. When China has the ability to hold information in the biosphere, and we don't, to them, that's a national security issue. So, you know, do I agree with that? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'd have to have somebody who's in special intelligence or a military operative who understands these things, you know, have them, you know, bring in their 2 cents. I just don't know.
Again, this is going to come back to what we've said before. This is a capitalist issue. This is an issue of capitalism. This is an issue of that only the hardcore industrialists and capitalists and industrial capitalists are concerned about. Why do we have to be concerned about it?
Yeah, well,
because it doesn't affect us directly.
That's true.
Because the only thing that it's going to affect us is like, oh, well, now here's a new way for you to get internet access or something else we can sell to you. Right. It doesn't.
Us as the consumer, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were just living my life without all this stuff, I mean, I'd probably, you know, live from a garden type of situation or a larger garden kind of situation with my neighbors.
Kind of like we do now, anyway.
And exchanging things, like I may not raise chickens for eggs, but my neighbor may, and so I exchange things with them, right? And so, you know, I'm going very simple. You know, I'm simplifying things down to a very minute level. But what I'm trying to say is,
realistic.
It's not realistic in this context, and that's what I keep saying. Keep coming back to is the context that keeps getting set up is one of us being consumers, and the fact that we have to be concerned about these things because it will affect our consumer lifestyle. Okay.
Exactly.
That's not a lifestyle or a way of living that we necessarily have to live in, and it's one that we've been kind of suckered into.
Yeah, we have been.
So
for sure.
These concerns are not my personal concerns,
right?
At all.
Right. No, I get it. But you know, let's take a look at this from what it is, which is that
the context in which we're talking.
Yeah, clearly the Department of Defense has set this thing up, and clearly they feel that there's a national security threat, and that these industries, even though they're set up for consumerism, like you said, they also feel like they have to go on the attack.
Right.
Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and play one last segment and then do a quick analysis of this person. And I'm not going to say who he is. We'll say who he is after the fact. I think he's going to be introduced here, so just bear with me.
Okay.
Secretary of HHS, Secretary Bacerra, and I wanted to get started with you and ask you to speak about the implications of recent biotechnology for human health and how your team is leading in that space.
Dr. Nelson, thank you to everybody on this team. Thank you to the innovators out there. Thank you. I don't have to say much. Whether it's the rapid antigen test, which was as basic a device as you could think of, to the mRNA vaccines that have saved millions of lives without biotech out there, you can imagine what the world would look like right now with COVID. And so it goes without saying that for the health space, you are indispensable, and we need to do this. And I believe what President Biden is doing, he's telegraphing a couple of things. Partnership, values. because as we work together, as we share what we know and what we do, we have to do it with those values in mind. And so I think it becomes really important how we launch on all these things. And I suspect probably the best thing for me to do is in telegraphing partnership to thank Jason, because he just shared one of his great scientists with us, Renee Wezergen, right? Wezergen.
Yeah.
You always forget there's nothing between the R and the G. Renee Wezergen is our new, just announced, inaugural director of ARPA-H. And just as Jason took her from DARPA, we got her back for ARPA-H. So we're very much looking forward to sharing in so many different ways. And we're looking forward for you sharing as well in so many different ways. How can I say this? We want in. We want in, whether it's starting with the innovation, the investments, whether it's the breakthroughs, whether it's the actual application, we want in. I think the president is telegraphing, we want in. He's telling you, Cancer Moonshot, ARPA-H, RAD-X. Forgive me for all the alphabet soup designations, but it would take my 3 minutes to talk, just give you the actual names. But we want in. And how in do we want at HHS? Well, let me continue with the alphabet soups. NIH, CDC, BARDA, ASPR, FDA, and then let me focus finally, because I want to stay at the time, PDUFA, MDUFA. We want in, you want in. We have a partnership, we share a lot. If we don't get something done real soon, we're going to share catastrophe together. We will have to lay off the people that let you harness innovation if we don't see Congress act soon. And I know that we have the Senator and the Congresswoman here who absolutely want to see us get that user fee bill done as quickly as possible. But I will tell you that this new generation of these user fees and the work that was done to sort of set the policy to calibrate it to the 21st century are going to let you go, with us working with you in partnership. We don't want to regulate you, we want to partner with you. And I think that when you take a look at all of the different agencies within HHS, it's not just health, it's the security, not just of your a next family and what you do on cancer or with that artificial limb. It's food security, it's climate security, we're part of global security, because that next weapon may not be some mechanical device, but something you put insert inside a body. And so all of those things, we want to work with you on those. And at the end of the day, and I want to thank Lori for mentioning this, it is about standards, because the ethics that will be involved in this partnership and the equity, and Congresswoman Roth, thank you so much for that mention, I think will drive that leadership for the U.S. If we get the ethics and the equity right, we're not going to lose anything. We're just going to keep gaining the stars that you see in this room who come from all parts of the world to do the innovation and the breakthroughs here in the U.S. So HHS wants in, count us in this partnerip and these values. Back to you, Dr.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Wow.
So that was Xavier Bacerra. He is the Director of Health and Human Services. And along with Anthony Fauci and even Joe Biden, he is, there are lawsuits filed against him for crimes against humanity right now.
Yeah.
Which nobody, of course, in the mainstream media is talking about. But this guy, was sitting in between a guy that looked kind of like maybe a football player, and and he was also sitting in between a woman who looked absolutely alarmed and just completely, horrified by some of the things he was saying.
Right. Well, and I don't know about you, Julie, but I feel pretty full after that word salad.
Oh God, the word
I'm
salad.
I'm not going to need any
comes
lunch.
out of this man is ridiculous. How many times could he say, "I want in, we want in, we want in"? He wants a piece of that $30 trillion pie. I mean, he was basically salivating and begging to be partnered with these leaders in industry. Just go on. I'm sure you have
Well,
lot to say.
he mentioned Jason, who shared his scientist with us. Jason is part of Bioginkgo Works.
Oh, God.
And he was brought up.
Ginkgo Bioworks.
Yeah, and they were brought up earlier as an example of an early example of government investment in in something that was developed in a university. Mm-hmm. And turned into a major company that partnered with the DoD again,
right.
And we had somebody on our pull quote show who talked about Bioginkgo Works, and that's
Ginkgo Bioworks.
Sorry, this is sort of the focus of her investigations and how they are extracting DNA samples from children in schools.
Yeah, exactly. Ginkgo Bioworks is one of
evil.
The worst operations out there.
Yeah, I don't use that word lightly. Evil. I don't ever use it.
No,
JP
evil. Never uses the word evil, but Ginkgo Bioworks does, exemplify evil. And in this White House summit, which was held on September 14th of 2022, which was 2 days after the executive order was signed, much of the time in the first half of this summit, much of the time was dedicated to Ginkgo Bioworks. So that tells you kind of where we are with this. Anything else you want to say about it?
There were a lot of things going on.
The whole ethics and equity thing.
Yeah, and so I'll come back to that in a second. But like his talk was filled with threats: economic threat, security threat. If this doesn't happen, then we're going to lay off people in our department. So if this doesn't happen, we're all going to see the results of that. Threatening Congress. He talked about ARPA-H, which is this ARPA Health. So the military is now has a not only do they have ARPA, which does a lot of investigation or R&D around technology, but now they've got investigation and R&D around health sciences. PDUFA, which you looked up, and because I didn't know what that was, it's the what is it, the Prescription
Drug User Fee Act.
Right, and then also the Medical User Fee Act. So these are more ways to financialize human health, because now we're getting medical intervention as a service, right? You're paying as a service as opposed to a product, and that's a way, So by that I mean the user fees are now a means of paying for your medicine as a service. So like they talk about software as a service. So like for instance, you might sign up for some sort of software tool that's only available on the cloud, and you pay monthly for it. Okay, that's software as a service. This is now medicine as a service, right? So user fees. Security, all these things. And now let me get to the ethics and equity. Now, ethics were brought up before, and equity, obviously. They were also talking about like leadership and standards. And so like what this is coming down into is the ethics portion is about behavior and behavior modification of people like us, the consumer. But it's also like the standards. They kept talking about how we need to be the leader in standards. In this industry or in this industry space, so that other countries cannot be that, right? So if you set the standards for something, then you can make sure that the rest of the world makes products for you in your standard. That's why we don't join the metric system. We never we talked about doing it, but we just decided not to because hey, we're the leader of the standards. So you're gonna have to make products just for us. In inches and feet,
right,
and whatever else, gallons, right?
I always thought it was odd that we were not on the metric system.
Exactly. So we set the standards, and so that's why they want to do this, so that they're industry leaders and they set the pace. Okay, so that and the equity basically again is coming down to outcomes and checking boxes. I had a better way of framing this before, and I kind of like it flew out of my mind, so I can't really get into the meat of it, but
No, I think that for him to end his portion of this summit, and many people came after him. He was kind of halfway. Actually, he was one of the first speakers in the summit, but for him to end his portion of it with equity It kind of tells you a lot, like where this is going. This is going to be all about, I hate to sound crass, but it's going to be, the equitable distribution of jobs to rich brown-skinned or black-skinned people. Which again isn't about equity at all. It's about class.
Yeah.
There are a lot of very well-off people that were born into a meritocracy.
People of color, yeah.
There are, people of color that were born into a meritocracy that I wasn't born into.
Yeah, right.
That you weren't born into.
So
it's not about equity, it's about class.
Well, and again, it's not,
so it's cynically used.
Cynically used. They use race as the face of this, right?
Right.
But when it really comes down to is class. It's like, in our neighborhood, the people of color certainly are not of this class that they're talking to, that they're part of, right? And so, I want to come back to ethics again, real quick. I want to really emphasize this: is these are ethics that are their ethics, and that's why I came down to the idea of like standards.
Right.
Their ethics and their standards are the ones that are going to be used for the dissemination of all of this technology.
Right.
It's not, the ethics they're talking about are not, your like personal day-to-day life where you're trying to just, exist with other people. And so, your ethics are basically,
you're
polite. You're
you
polite. I'm not going to steal
space,
people. I'm not going to kill people.
Right.
I'm not, going to do these things that, are just kind of like everyday kind of things, right? No, these are ethics that they come up with, like we talk about bioethics. And like Fauci's wife is a bioethics professor,
something
right?
like that. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
And so these are rules and laws that they create in order to justify the kinds of things that they do as an industry or as to people.
Right.
Right.
So to give a really clear cut, obvious example of what you're talking about, and then we can close out this 2-hour conversation, is that right now there are ethics in place in industry, and they're standard ethics, whether they are supported by or sort of dominated by the FDA. They're written out in every industry, every corporation, no matter what sector it's from, whether it's the medical industry or the tech industry. They have to follow a certain set of ethics, okay? Corporate ethics. And what these organizations are trying to do, what this summit is also about, is to change those ethics, to create a different type of standardized ethics so that it can overtake and throw away the old version of ethics and put in this new version. A good example of that is this trending idea that we've seen, or this trending narrative that's come around in mainstream media a lot lately, which is that, the pharmaceutical industry and the vaccine industry is just going to do away with clinical trials.
Right.
That clinical trials was set up as a provisional ethics method by which you could move forward with your product.
Right.
And in this case, that product is vaccine. So they're going to take away that old ethics, which is the clinical trials, and replace it with something new,
right.
which was whatever.
And what they'll do is they'll wave like animal testing in front of you as a red flag to distract you, right?
Right.
Oh, but we're getting rid of animal testing. Isn't that a good thing? Well, yeah. I mean, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing in the first place. I'm against vivisection, animal testing, but the fact that you exist in the first place is what's really wrong here.
What's really wrong.
It's not just that you're testing on animals. It's the fact that you exist as an industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And
So I guess that's what I'm trying to say from a corporate perspective and from a business perspective. The industry itself should not. None of these people should even exist.
Right.
I mean, seriously, they should not exist.
I guess that's what I was getting at earlier.
But they do, and so we have to live in the world we live in, and a lot of the ethics that were there before are going to go away. We saw that with the clinical trials just poof going away. Where are the ethics with these doctors and these pharmacies and various people that are pushing the COVID shot on people? Where are their ethics? Because the standard ethical practice has always been to roll out clinical trials and then give permission for the product to move forward.
Right.
So this whole symposium, this whole summit is about changing the way we operate in industry, all industry.
And sadly, we didn't get into this too much, but I just want to touch on it because it's important, is changing the way we behave in society.
Sure.
Societal behavior change is part of all this. One of the guys, and I'm looking for my notes here, one of the dudes said, behavioral and health change. So tying industry into behavior and health.
Right.
And so behavioral modification through, nudging and things like that. And, we're not talking about like big changes in a quick amount of time. This is behavioral change over a period of time. And the way that I like to kind of frame that is the idea of like, they're really pushing the idea of electric cars. And electric cars are, there's no carbon that comes out of the tailpipe, but they don't talk about the carbon that goes into producing that electricity in the first place, right? They just talk about the tailpipe thing. So there's your equity and your box checking, right? Mm-hmm. But also think about this. They advertise it as a way of, just like they've always advertised cars, it's a form of freedom. And you can take your electric Jeep and go up into the mountains and
get away from it all and
not
go
pollute
far
the world.
Away, and you could travel across the countryside
but you can't.
in your car.
But you can't in an electric vehicle because they only have a certain range. And there has been no real way other than Tesla having areas in a
pods where you can
recharge your
juice
car.
Juice up your car.
There's no real infrastructure that has been put into place, and I think that has been deliberate
Done on purpose,
because they don't want you going very far.
Exactly. So
okay?
This behavioral change that you're talking about, if you don't mind, is how you value freedom.
Right. Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
redefine what freedom means.
Well, and not only that, but it's doing it incrementally, right? So by saying, okay, now you have your electric car, gosh, you can't go that far. So now you're starting to set up new expectations around what you can and cannot do.
Right.
Right.
So
you're now limiting yourself.
Exactly.
Because it's like, oh well, our car won't go that far.
So we can only go this far for
right.
our yearly sojourn across the country. Right. We can only go this far and go to this state. So what you're doing, what you were told your whole life in this country is that the sky is the limit. Mm-hmm. That is a phrase, a cliche that we have all been taught. What the new generation is being taught and what this White House summit is about is to control and to reframe what that means.
Right.
The sky is no longer the limit.
Right.
You have limitations on how far you can drive in your electric car now, and that's going to be really normalized.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
That's going to be gently adopted into our consciousness.
Exactly.
And that's part of that, again, that soft war, game of
soft
Go.
Power, yeah.
Soft power, soft power technique, that sort of game of Go technique where you're able to come after your enemy, but instead of just going after your enemy and capturing them when they're at their best, you want to make sure you wear them down little by little. Take away what it means to be a free roaming individual. Okay, that's taken care of. Now take away what they can eat. Now take away this until they're completely captured and smashed under the thumb like a little bug.
Right. So it's removing expectations and changing them to reflect what they want you to do. Right. Mm-hmm. And, the electric car is just an example. Okay.
Sure.
It's just one example.
It's a really good
one.
I
think it's a good example of, many things that are out there that are going to go on. And I can't give you any of them because, they haven't really told us yet. They've told us some of these things. Right. In this summit. And in the executive order. Some of these things are revealed, but obliquely.
Right.
And so I think that the electric car is a good example. Now, I don't care about cars really, but what I do care about is that expectation of like being able to freely roam where you want to go.
Right. Yeah. So that's a big aspect to this too. I mean, when you're dealing with a wartime scenario, it's a war on the consciousness. It's a war on your value systems and your expectations of the world around you. I think we want to
Yeah.
go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah.
It's been 2 hours. I want to thank you guys for joining us today and for listening for this long. We are going to make this free to the public.
So you can share it with your friends.
So that you can share it around. If you got something out of it, I hope you did. If you'd like to support us, please go to patreon.com/Book of Hours and become a patron for as little as $2 a month. Join Rockman so you have access to all of our private material that's not available to the public as well. And or you can just make a donation, and we'll include the Linktree link for you to go to and make a donation in any way that works for you.
All right.
So thanks a lot, guys. I hope you got something out of this.
Yeah, and thank you for attending or for joining us on this special edition of
Footnote.
I almost said something else.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.